The last lighthouse kept shining. After the sea disappeared, the lighthouse stood 30 miles from the nearest water. That was the part tourists came to photograph. A white tower on a hill of yellow grass, its glass room turning every night above dry fields, old roads and barns where fishing boats sat rotting under tarps. The sea had vanished before I was born. People said it like weather, like a bad winter, like a fact that had stopped hurting because enough calendars had passed over it. One morning in 1988, the tide went out from Harlewick Bay and kept going. By noon, the harbour was mud. By evening, gulls were walking where ferries used to turn. By morning, the seabed was a plain. My father kept the lighthouse lit anyway. He said ships still needed it. When he died, the council sent me a letter asking me to sign the decommission papers. They called the lighthouse a heritage structure, an electrical liability, and a site of low commercial value. They did not mention that my father had spent 40 years climbing 118 iron steps every sunset to light a lamp for a sea that was no longer there. I drove up on a Friday with a cardboard box, a thermos of coffee, and a key I had not used since I was 16. Inside, the tower smelled of salt. Not dust, not rust. Salt. My father had left the keeper's room almost tidy. Tin mug by the stove, logbooks stacked by year. A narrow bed folded with hospital corners. On the wall, a chart of Harlewick Bay showed blue water where the land outside the window was brown and dry. I opened the newest logbook. The final entry was dated 2 nights before he died. Light steady. Fog inland. Received distress call, 23:14. Vessel name, Mercy Bell. Position, impossible. Voice sounded young. Below that, in my father's careful writing, do not answer with your own name. At sunset, the lamp switched on by itself. I was halfway up the stairs when the machinery began to turn. The beam swept over the dead seabed, over the road, over my car, over the old harbour cranes frozen in fields like broken insects. Every time the light passed the window, the room flashed white and then black. The radio crackled. I found it under a canvas sheet. Green metal casing, cracked dial, microphone worn smooth by my father's hand. At first, there was only static. Then a voice said, "Harlewick Light, this is Mercy Bell. We have lost the coast." I stopped breathing. The voice was a boy's, maybe 12. Calm in the way children become calm when panic has tired them out. "Harlewick Light, do you read?" I reached for the microphone, then saw the note my father had taped above the radio. "Names are anchors." I pressed the button. "Mercy Bell, this is Harlewick Light." Static rushed in, then the boy again. "We can see you." Outside, the beam crossed the dry fields. Nothing moved. No water, no ship, no boy. "What is your position?" "We don't know. The compass is turning. The captain says the sea went wrong." Behind him, someone shouted. Wood groaned under pressure. "How old is this call?" I asked. There was a pause. "It's Tuesday." "What year?" The boy began to cry. I did not sign the decommission papers that night. In the morning, I walked the old seabed. Grass had grown over most of it, but if you knew where to look, you could still find shells pressed into the dirt and the ribs of small boats half buried under weeds. At the edge of what had been the deep channel, I found a bell. Mercy Bell was engraved around the rim. The metal was warm. Back in town, nobody wanted to talk about ships. At the grocery, an old woman dropped a jar when I asked about the Mercy Bell. At the council office, the clerk said records from 1988 were incomplete. At the pub, a man with white eyebrows told me my father had been kind, but sick. "He heard things," the man said. "On the radio?" "In the light." He looked toward the hill. "Your mother wanted him to stop." My mother had left when I was 9. The official version was exhaustion. The version I hated was that she could not share my father with a lighthouse. I had built most of my anger on that story. It was useful. It made one parent loyal and the other weak. That evening, I found her handwriting in the 1996 logbook. Light steady. Received call from the St. Ola. 3 voices. One was Daniel. Daniel was my brother. He had disappeared before I was born. Nobody in my family said his name. I knew him only from a shoebox photograph. A serious 7-year-old in red rain boots, standing beside my mother at the harbour. When I was little, I thought he was a cousin. Later, I learned not to ask. Below my mother's entry, my father had written, "She answered him by name." The next page was torn out. At 23:14, the radio came alive. "Halawick Light, this is St. Ola." My hand shook so badly I hit the desk. A man's voice followed, older than the boy from Mercy Bell. "Keeper, please, there is a child here asking for his mother." I pressed the button. "Do not say names over this channel." Static. Then a small voice said, "Is Mum there?" I sat down on the floor. He sounded 7. The tower groaned as the lamp turned. Through the window the beams swept over the vanished bay, and for 1 second the fields below shone silver. Not grass, water, masts. Black waves shouldering against the rocks. Then dry land again. The council came the next morning with a locksmith and a man from utilities. "We're cutting power today," the clerk said. "This has gone on long enough." I stood in the doorway with my father's key in my fist. "People are out there." The clerk's face softened, which was worse than disbelief. "There is no out there." They cut the power at noon. At sunset, the lamp stayed dark. For the first time in my life, Halewick Hill had no sweeping light. The fields seemed larger without it, empty in a way they had not been before. At 23:14, the radio crackled once and died. Then every boat bell in town began to ring. In barns, in sheds, in glass display cases, on mantelpieces. From the museum, the pub, the church hall, the school corridor where children had made a paper model of the vanished sea. The sound rolled uphill like weather. I ran to the lantern room. The glass was black. Below, across 30 miles of dry seabed, little points of light appeared. Hundreds of them. Ships hanging in the dark where no ships could be. Each one answering a lighthouse that had gone blind. Behind me, the radio whispered without power. Halawick Light. It was my father, not the old voice from his last year, the younger one from my childhood when he still laughed with his whole chest. "Don't use my name," he said. I pressed my forehead to the dead glass. "What happened to the sea?" "It didn't leave," he said. "It was taken aside." "By what?" "By everyone who was called and answered." The truth came slowly, because part of me had already known it. Names were anchors. Answer a lost voice by name, and the sea remembered the route home. But it remembered through you, through your days, your sleep, your family. My mother had answered Daniel. My father had answered my mother when she vanished after him in every way except body. If I relight it, some find the coast. And if I don't, static moved like surf. They drift where years don't pass. I thought of Daniel in red boots, my mother losing him twice, my father feeding a lamp with his life, one night at a time, because he had mistaken guilt for duty until duty became all he had left. The emergency generator was in the base of the tower. I had watched Dad test it when I was small. I knew the crank, the fuel line, the ugly cough before it caught. The lamp woke at 23:31. The beam swept the dry fields. For one full turn, the vanished sea came back. I saw the Mercy Bell low in the water. I saw the St. Ola with torn sails. I saw a boy in red boots standing at the rail beside a woman whose hair was turning grey. My mother, She looked up at the light. I did not say her name. I did not say his. The next morning, the council found me asleep beside the radio. The decommissioned papers were gone. So were the logbooks from 1988 through 1996. They asked what I had done. I told them the truth. Kept the light on. I live in the keeper's room now. The town calls it grief, then duty, then eccentricity, depending on how kind they feel. Every night I climb 118 steps. Every night the beam crosses fields that smell of salt. Sometimes the radio is quiet. Sometimes a ship calls. And once a month, just before dawn, a woman I do not name says, "Thank you from somewhere beyond the coast."